beef up on certain sections. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the presentation, which has been done with Google Earth. Putting together, it's not quite 37 slides. Some are the trails and stuff on there. But our big broad overview for folks coming from outside of the US, we are going to the eastern side of California in the Sierra Nevadas, way the heck over here. And some of these lines that we have on here represent some drive time that we're going to be doing, because getting there is half the fun, right? The journey there. And I absolutely forgot to give the bigger overview of, as we're flying, as we're driving, as we're getting into the park, we're preparing to do a 14-mile round trip hike, which is the Half Dome hike, which usually takes folks 9 to 16 hours, depending on how leisurely you'd like to take it, and with a 4,800 foot elevation gain. So this is a super strenuous hike, not just like buy a plane ticket, let's go check it out. There's some technicality involved with the difficulty and also with permits, which is a weird space to navigate, but we'll get to that. But again, we're having fun on different trips getting to Yosemite National Park if we've never been there before. From LA, we're looking at about 5.5 hours. Sacramento, San Francisco, both coming in at 3:30. And even making it part of Las Vegas is one of my favorite routes in. This kind of poorly represented blue line takes like the back door into Yosemite, which for the longest time, I didn't know there was a pass on the other side. So you can see the entirety of the Eastern Sierras before dropping in to the park. But for the vast majority of us coming from the west side, our main California, we'll be entering from the west, which is this tunnel view area right here. And we'll be checking out for this trip and this hike, and probably if you do this as a long weekend or a few days, Yosemite Valley will be your destination, which is a far cry from the entirety of Yosemite National Park, which is big and massive, but the most populated area, the most traveled area is this really cool glacier cut scar of land. It's super short. I had it written down. It's only like 15 miles long. Double check me on that. We'll drop some links. But yeah, it's a super short section of the park that all the action is at. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a chance to mention that before Yosemite Valley was a park, before it saw millions and millions of visitors a year, Yosemite Valley National Park, the Sierras, were home to people that went by the name of the Iwani people. And they settled in places like the Yosemite Valley in birch bark huts. They foraged, they hunted, they had intricate trade networks. So well before the park as we know it today, there were people here thousands of years beforehand using that space. And again, for the folks coming in from the west side, this will probably be your first view of Yosemite Valley as you come into it. Tunnel view is one of the most famous postcard shots as we see Bridal Veil Falls and we see our target, we see our objective, Half Dome, on this right side, south side of the valley, across from not Half Dome over here, El Cap or El Capitan over here. But we'll take this nice leisurely drive through the park to get to the start of our hike. And another really cool story that I don't think gets enough attention in Yosemite National Park is that of the Buffalo Soldiers, which was a regiment of African-American soldiers that were stationed out in the national forest, or even more broadly, just like, I think this was even before it was a federally protected land, but these soldiers became the archetype, the first park rangers, as they were protecting this land from illegal logging, poaching, and other things that were seeking to develop this area in a not super sustainable way. A lot were stationed out by the sequoia groves, which in this picture, they're like a little bit behind us, or a lot of it behind us. But let's keep zooming in. And oh yeah, last one. I love the history so much. I'm sorry, it's supposed to be the trail. But here we are on Glacier Point. We're scouting it out. we're taking a look at just how high we need to climb, because we do need to climb pretty darn high up to the top of Half Dome, which is about at 5,000 feet above sea level. And cool to kind of take a moment to recognize and appreciate the geologic, always a hard word for me, the geologic action that has helped make Yosemite Valley what it looks like today. So 50 million years ago, we have a scene that looks very much like this, just green, maybe a winding river. Slowly, through other erosion, some of those soft sediments, top layers of the earth are getting eroded away. That was 10 million years. Now we're 3 million years. We've got a whole bunch of erosion, and it's just these big granite outcroppings that are left over. All of a sudden, we have more and more ice ages that fill this up. The ice and the water add to that erosion of these valleys. And all of a sudden, we see just these sweeping granite structures. And we are right about on here. I think we're right on here in this little tiny picture with it right there. To the valley that we almost know today, sans a little bit of lake water. And from Glacier Point, this is one start of the trail where you can actually hike to Half Dome from here, going around. But we're going to go with a more traditional route, leaving from Happy Isles Trailhead right down here, hiking up this entire section past Sentinel Dome, seeing a bunch of waterfalls on the way. And we're going to swing all the way to the back of Half Dome and find the shallowest way up. But it's really not recommended that we treat this as a true day hike. My recommendation, it's a 9 to 16-hour hike. Really good to have lodging in the park before and after, because I've done it twice. I was cooked both times as a 13-year-old and as a 22-year-old. 3 places to stay in the park, from classiest to not least classy, but most outdoor rec oriented maybe. The Iwani Hotel, Curry Village, formerly Yosemite Village, formerly Half Dome Village, formerly Curry Village, million names. And finally, Upper Pines Campground, which we'll cruise super quick to see those. Because Half Dome's such an aggressive long day hike, really recommending that we stay overnight. Upper Pines Campground, just so we have an idea of what it is a Yosemite Valley campground, and that it is trafficked by a lot of tourists. This may be in like winter or fall too. It gets busy, it gets loud, but we are just a half mile from the Happy Isles trailhead, so we can walk or take a shuttle, which is really nice. And it is super affordable, and it hits on that Yosemite camping experience. Another, a little more upscale of an option is Curry Village, which we can stay at all these tents, these little huts, some of which have like what's called a heater. It's a hard word. Heaters inside. So a little step up, a little bit nicer of like a cot bed in each of them. So if you are just destroyed after the hike, a nice spot to stay. A little bit more expensive at $90 a night. And they are 1 mile from the trailhead. If 14 miles isn't enough, you can walk from the village there, or those shuttles are available just to keep parking real nice. I thought this was a really cool overhead shot, just again, to kind of take in the scope of what's going on in Yosemite Valley. Lots of people all the time. It's almost wilderness meets Disneyland in a lot of ways. And a lot of that will hold true for the Half Dome hike. If you're looking for pristine wilderness alone with your thoughts and birds chirping, this might not be the hike for you based on its popularity. If you type in best hikes in the US, it seems like Half Dome always comes up. The last one before we get hiking, there's just so much cool stuff to see in the valley, and the human developments are also cool to see too. The Iwani Hotel was an early draw or attempt to draw people into the park. With kind of luxury accommodations. So you could stay in this hotel resort lodge that was stylistically supposed to just blend in to the granite the granite sides of the valley itself. A cool little piece of history was it was converted to a naval hospital we're like a psychiatric facility for soldiers experiencing shell shock, or what we might know today as PTSD. But today, it doesn't look like this. You're not sleeping on top of other people. For as low as $341 a night, you can stay at this kind of more luxury accommodations, really cool fireplaces. You're 2 miles from the trailhead, and those same shuttles are available. Enough about that, Chris. Let's get into it. Let's take a peek at where we're going and where we've been already too. So here we are. We see where the Iwani is, Curry Village. We see where Upper Pines is. The trailhead is Happy Isles. So this Happy Isles trailhead is going to be our start. And we're going to slowly work up this almost little mini valley all the way to an area called Little Yosemite Valley. Then we're going to wrap around, and finally we're going to climb this long fin of Half Dome itself. Again, 7 miles each way. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that big 4,800 foot elevation gain is pretty darn taxing. And a lot of this time spent is also kind of accounting for the number of other people on the trail. Spots like the Mist Trail, which we'll see, the cables themselves, emerald pools, places where people start to congregate or kind of collect, can add a little bit of time onto it. It is an out and back, but you can kind of change that too, or switch up some of it. The Half Dome Trail is not just one singular trail. It's actually 3 trails, including the John Muir Trail, which is where we'll start at Happy Isles. We'll cut off my preferred one. It's a little bit wetter, slipperier, steeper, is this Mist Trails right underneath Vernal Falls and up the side before reconnecting to the John Muir Trail to see Nevada Falls. And then later we'll peel off the JMT to go on this specific Half Dome Trail. The rest of the John Muir Trail will keep going and going and going all the way to Mount Whitney, like 213 miles, another world famous hike, not to be done in a day. But this is our 7 mile one way, 7 mile the other way loop right here. Anything else about this? Oh yeah, I put the time 1,000,000 times on there, sorry. So as we're starting out from that Happy Isles, it's a really leisurely walk kind of through the woods, our lowest elevation, before we reach points like Clark Point, where we're looking out at Vernal Falls right over here. And this is a good space to say that if the sky kind of looks like this when we're at Clark Point, we might not have started early enough. With that 9 to 16 hours, even if we're bringing flashlights and headlamps, a really good practice when we're going out is to set a definitive turnaround time. So in this situation, if it's 3:30 and we're not on the top of Half Dome, we won't have enough time to make it down safely in the light, or if something else went wrong. By having those turnaround times, we give us the safest margin and the most comfortable margin too, to get back with the resources that we need. All of a sudden we push it and we don't top out till 5, and someone rolls their ankle at 6 o'clock on the way down and we still have 6 miles left. All of a sudden our night got not fun at all. Starting before sunrise is a good place to be. And at this point in the trail, we're about like 1 mile in, 1.5 miles in. We're probably going to check our pockets to make sure we have a permit, which is 100% required to do the cables, which is the last piece of climbing Half Dome. But we'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. So that view from up there on Clark Point was on the John Muir Trail. This is a little bit lower at the Mist Trail. And this is Mist Trail / Vernal Falls is the name of this waterfall. And you can see the trail right here and all this wet moisture and greenery, because when the waterfall is pumping, this whole thing, this whole trail up and down right here too, will just get you absolutely drenched when it's flowing at peak capacity. And this is part of the Merced River too, which is the main river going through Yosemite, big Yosemite Valley as well. This is a shot from the Vernal Falls, probably in the fall or at a low rain, low precipitation year. We'll look at one that looks like the scene with water going full bore. Some no-goes too, some other things we're checking as we're at this almost 2-mile mark in here. If there are storm clouds in the area, we're about to be unprotected on top of a ridge, and rangers will shut down the cables because it is dangerous due to lightning, as well as just rain, water, and wetness on the ground that can make that really steep last ascent in the cables way more dangerous. And finally, this is 100% a seasonal trail, not this mist trail part, but up near the cables. But that final portion to complete Half Dome in its entirety is only available Columbus Day, which is October, early October, to Memorial Day, late May. That's when it's closed. I don't know why I wrote it that way. It's open in the summer, Memorial Day to Columbus Day. And finally, on this trail, because there's so many people, they do not allow any dogs of any kind on there, just to know before you bring your really cool husky to the valley. And here's that shot of the waterfall going a little bit thicker with it all. We can start to see all that mist spraying up. And water's part of why people do this trail. And it's also a big consideration. We have our permit in our pocket, but we need to make sure that we're bringing enough water and water treatment methods, because there's not a store selling bottled water and there aren't water fountains all the way up. NPS is kind of recommended that you not bring throughout the day, you drink at least 1 gallon of water, which seems excessive, but then I don't know how to convert liters to gallons. And then they're not saying to carry that 1 gallon jug the whole way, but finding different ways of treating and refilling your water. A more manageable number that they give is 2 liters to the top of Nevada Falls, which this is Vernal Falls. We've got a little bit further to go before we reach Nevada. The only water fountain on the whole trail is just a mile from the trailhead. It's actually right around this corner where there's also a bathroom. But the footbridge to Vernal Falls is the only water fountain out on the trail. You can, and recommended too, treat water out of the Merced River. Just that we're all on the same page. We're not stopping by the river and just scooping water into our mouths. Human waste, animal waste, other bacteria like Giardia is a common one you'll hear, can cause us to get sick from drinking untreated water directly out of the river. So looking into water treatment methods like iodine tablets, boiling it in this situation, fire permits pending, using physical filters, gravity filters, fabric filters, or ceramic filters. There's a whole bunch of different ways, but do make sure you treat that water that you get out of the Merced. And we're going to come up to Little Yosemite Valley too. When we see that, we'll remember that's the point where we deviate away from the Merced River. So Little Yosemite will be our last option to treat the water. There's also, this is at the top of that waterfall that we just saw. This is Emerald Pools, looking at Sentinel Dome as well. There are 4 restrooms along the way. Below Vernal Falls, 1 mile in, above Vernal Falls, like 2 miles in, top of Nevada Falls, a little further, in Yosemite Valley, which is still just about halfway up, is our last restroom. But here we are, Emerald Pools. We're still on about an hour and a half into our hike. Nevada Falls is going to be that second one that we see. And we're making sure that making sure that we're thinking about other risks involved as we go. Blisters, shoes, ankle support are really big as we're hiking 14 miles over rough and uneven terrain. This is not an ADA accessible paved trail. Some of it is, much of it is not. So we're really making sure we have some worn in shoes. We're thinking about dehydration, not enough water, hyponatremia, too much water. We want to make sure we're eating. Sunburn, we're bringing some gloves we'll need later on. We are cognizant of altitude sickness, in which the only cure for that is getting right back down. And this is the top of, didn't look like that same Nevada Falls, another low water picture from the top of Nevada Falls. And we can see how far we've come circling through here. Shoes are important, our little check-in. We still have shoes on our feet. We have a water treatment because we're coming up on Little Yosemite Valley, our last chance. We have gloves for the cables, and we have something to pack out our trash because there's no trash cans all along this trail, and we still have our permit in our pocket. But Nevada Falls is definitely a cool little stop before we start to make our way a little bit further. Not this, this is a fake one. This is a little short one. That's not even Half Dome itself. But here we are at that Little Yosemite Valley, which is the backpackers campground that we talked about. This is a little bit past Nevada Falls. We're still cooking our ways up. And if something were to go wrong at this point, there is a ranger station here at Little Yosemite Valley. There's also a lot of rangers that patrol the trail, being one of the most popular trails. And then there's also a ranger, from what I've heard all the time in the summer, at the base of those cables, checking permits. And I was 2 for 2 with finding those rangers. So they are there, they are checking. Don't put them in a situation where they need to, no easily preventable incidents. Maybe that's what it is. This is another shot of that campground and our last bathroom, my last formal bathroom. They really don't want us using wag bags, which is like pooping into a paper and plastic bag, because there's so many people on this trail here too. There's also, we haven't talked about it, but there's no trash. We did talk about that. There are bear lockers here for the campers because there's a lot of bears in this area. And bear lockers are like a metal box that you can throw stuff in and lock it. And this chubby black bear can't get into it. If you see a bear on the trail, which is not super likely because there's so many people on this trail, so much noise. But if you do see a black bear, they're more scared of you than you are of them. Get big, make a lot of noise, and stay in that big group all together without surrounding the bear. Little Yosemite Valley Campground. We're halfway there. We are getting up to it. We can see how ridge-like. You'd think the dome was like a full dome. Definitely not. We're halfway there, and we've gotten through the really scenic parts of the trail. We don't have a lot of stops as we're kind of starting to beat the tree line on this backside. It's not as pretty. There's not as much to see, but a good point to remind ourselves about trail etiquette, because we probably just passed or hiked with, gosh, up to 500 people plus. Uphill hikers have the right of way. They're working harder, so you should say, keep on rolling, keep that momentum. Horses, I'm 99% sure you can't have horses on this trail. But if you do, horses have the right of way, and you should stop downhill of them. So you're not like on top of the mountain looking scary. And then we're always gonna stay on the trail, not make new trails. 1,000 people on this trail, 1 million a year, can start to make a lot of social trails not going where we need to go. And then we're aware of noise pollution as well as we go. The boombox on the side of the shoulder, it's not a good look on a super traveled trail. And if we're like, all right, Chris, you said there wasn't anything cool on the back end, I'm not going to go that way. You're more than welcome to climb Snake Dike, or also called Snake Hike, because it's a relatively, not a rock climber, it's a relatively easy grade 3, 8 pitch climb, where you can climb from, where were we? Yeah, we were probably over in here, Little Yosemite Valley. Maybe we were probably a little higher up, but you can climb up this side with all the correct equipment, going with someone who's gone before and being super comfortable in your own skills. Snake Dike is a good way. For everyone else, we have to swing all the way to this backside. And here's where those permits are going to start to come in handy. We can hike this without permits thus far. Pretty soon, our permits are going to get checked, and they're going to say yay or nay, they being the rangers. There's 300 total permits per day, 225 to day hikers, 75 to backpackers. And the majority of those are given away in a preseason lottery, which you can apply to in March 1 to March 31. You get an email saying, hooray, you got your permits that you put in for by listing your email and an alternative leader's email. And you can apply for 6 people. So a good pro tip is if you have a group of 6, you should probably have all 6 put in their own application to increase your chances a little bit. And then you find out in April. There are day permits available, but there's just 50 a day, and you actually have to go in and apply for them 2 days before your hiking day. So the day permit thing is kind of a misnomer. But a couple different ways. Backpacking and wilderness permits are their separate category. And you can get them a little easier, but still needs to go through the permit process. Reminder about that season, can't do this all year. We're not climbing the cables with this snow on the ground, not because of the snow, but because rangers will physically take the cables down, so you cannot climb up it. Not safe to do with, definitely not safe to do without. Clouds Rest over there is maybe a consolation hike in case you come in a shoulder season. This was my least favorite part of the hike. Half Dome's here. We're on that ridge. You're super exposed to heat in this area. All of a sudden, we don't have trees protecting us. It does get warm in the summer. This can be a tough spot as we're just walking through. It looks easy, but it's also going to get ridiculously steep. And again, the sun's just beating down. You're close, but you're not there yet. This is a terribly grainy picture just to capture this last kind of climb before we get to the cables. And it's gorgeous and stunning all the way around. But 13-year-old Chris was just looking at his feet going, oh my God, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. Are we there yet? And here's just one more shot at how troublesome that was for me. Really just left an imprint. All the way up, and we see there's still a lot of people. Those 300 people a day are all kind of coming in that same area, unless you're getting up early enough for a sunrise or a sunset situation. So here's the bread and butter. Here's the exciting part. This hat, this cloud that looks like a hat, it adds to it. This is a bad shot, but what we're capturing here is the weight before the cables. The cables are metal cables with metal poles about 1 person width apart with wooden planks on the ground to help you climb up. And I don't have an exact degree, but it's steeper than you think. So waiting your turn, this is a good spot. If we're here for lunch, our timing is nice. If we're here and it's 4 o'clock, we've messed up. We probably should think about heading back down. Not a fun hike to do in the dark. So we're waiting in line for these cables, and this is probably our ranger right here, checking to make sure those permits are in with everyone's name, with the correct trip leader, with the whole thing. The view is just stunning. Even from here, this is enough of a prize for me if we're hiking, because this is the fun part. It's way too steep right there. Not into it. Single file line, 1 human being apart. And this is where those gloves will come in handy, just to save some friction on our hands. Be prepared for these hikers to be very slow. Be prepared for these hikers to be slow, these hikers to be slow, and then like 2 fast people in between, just to be a little bit frustrating. You'll show your permits, you'll have shoes with good tread, we'll put those gloves on, and up we go. Here are those posts, here's the wood, and it is straight up and down. As a little kid, it was just steep enough that it wasn't fun. Definitely doable. There's only a few incidences that have ever happened, and they're usually due to people exhibiting reckless behavior. We're being patient with others. We're letting faster climbers pass when safe to do so. And we're always, I don't know why the NPS has to say it, but we're staying inside these cables. Not worth flipping to the outside to pass someone up. And this JISP climber has an extra piece of rope with a carabiner on it, technical climbing gear. So they are clipping in between as they go up, using that rope as like an oh crap anchor. If they were to slip, if something was to happen, this adds a little bit of time to your climb as you need to unclip it each time you come to a pole and clip it back on. All of a sudden, you're only working with one hand. Definitely a safety feature, not required, but nice to have if you know how to use it and you're using it appropriately. And then again, this is my wonky slide of just seeing how steep it is. It gets a little ladder-like for a bit. Let me see if I can turn this around. Oh, I apologize for the sickness. Next slide, so I can straighten it out. Just more seeing how pretty darn straight up it goes, and overhangs like this are my least favorite part. Cool views all the way around, but again, it is 400 feet of climb. And parts like this too, just increase the sketch factor a little bit, where you need to bring this big step up to get to it. So it might look like a lot, it might not look like a lot, but it does add a little something to it. But after you're done with that 400 feet, you're treated to some really killer views. I did this one first because couldn't imagine the scope of the size of the top. Football fields could fit all the way up here, but you swing around and you have these absolutely killer views of the valley, or shots like this one, taken in the view from almost 9,000 feet, that same shot of the valley. Or if we spin around, we can see the opposite way going out to the east. Mountain peaks like Cloud's Rest right there. And some super happy hikers who have absolutely crushed it on their way up to the top. But again, this is the true halfway point. We're 7 miles in, we did it, we celebrate. It's not 3:30, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever our turnaround time is, because we need to do it all again on our way back down the route. And I think that is it for our tour of Half Dome. Celeste has been kind enough to throw some resources in the chat right there. Please do visit those nps.gov websites for more formal information on the hike itself, and then also on how to do things like getting those campsite permits or the actual permits themselves. That cool cable video does show what it's actually like. So if I made it seem too scary or not scary enough, maybe check out that video to get different perspectives. We appreciate you joining us. I apologize for going over. Just cool to get nostalgic, and I'm planning to do it again when it opens up. So thank you for stopping by. We will see you next time for a tour of national parks of Utah, as well as we've got folks from the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics coming to give a talk next Thursday. So thank you for coming by, and we'll see you next time.